The Dallas Cowboys are expected to cut Amari Cooper before the March 20th deadline. Is that a good and smart move by the Cowboys? All that and more on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. You can find me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Today I'm joined by Landon McCool. As always, you can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, the Cowboys might have finally broken me. The plan is to the plan is to release Amari Cooper before the March 20th deadline when his salary is guaranteed, according to ESPN's Adam Schefter. We've been talking about this for a while. Landon, do you agree?
That's a very tough question to answer. I think I'm still on the side of I don't agree. I think that they probably should keep Cooper. But I also think that the way that people are reacting to this, like it's a foregone conclusion and obvious, is completely missing what's happening here. Cooper's number is ridiculously high, and Cooper is not producing anywhere near the level that you would expect for someone.
Hold on. He didn't produce that way last year at times, I think is fair. I don't think to say he's not producing near that number is necessarily fair.
You think that he's producing at a level that you would be happy with for $20 million a year in a wide receiver?
I think in 2020, yeah. I thought he was incredible in 2020. I really did. Even playing with Ben DiNucci and Garrett Gilbert and who was the other one? Andy Dalton. Like I thought he was unbelievable that season.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's also a whole season ago. So I just think that this idea that it's so cut and dry is incorrect. I think that, the money is very, very high. The contract is very, very movable in the sense that it's cuttable. It's not necessarily very tradable. And we can talk about that later. I think the Cowboys are victims of two things. One, victims of some other bad contracts, including Zeke's. And two, victims of the fact that they had a lot of really talented players that are all free agents this year. And so they're trying to figure out a way to make it work. I mean, I think, look, the salary cap is not real, not as real as we're being told at times. But I do think, that there are kind of limits to roster gymnastics at certain points, right? Like at certain points after contracts are done. And so, I mean, I think the Cowboys have no good options here. I think that there's a preconceived notion that the Cowboys have a good option and a bad option, and they're taking the bad option. That's not the case at all. They've got two pretty bad options here. And I think that they're trying to do what they can. They may be making a huge mistake, but I think that they're making a calculated plan to try to retain other players that they feel like may be more valuable moving forward.
All right, let's talk about Amari on the field for a second, because I think that's the biggest problem is people see that $22 million for the cap, and then they look at the total numbers and they think, well, is that really what a $22 million receiver is supposed to be like? Is that necessarily Amari's fault? During his Cowboy career, he's averaged 7.5 targets per game. Is that his fault, or is that the offense's fault?
I don't know that it's as cut and dry as anything. And again, fault doesn't really matter here. Like, right. I think, and I'm pointing that out for this specific reason. I think people are under the impression that the Cowboys are going to cut Amari Cooper because they don't like him, or they don't think that he's a talented
contract
player
that they can move pretty cleanly, right?
And on top of that, it's a lot of exactly what we talked about at the end of the year when this all came up, right? If the idea is that the Cowboys don't want to go to relying on a number one offense, if they want to spread the ball around, then does a $20 million wide receiver make sense? like
Well,
even on your books, you know.
To be fair, though, I think you're right. This was the plan going into the 2018 season, and the reason they had to trade for Amari, though, right? They didn't feel like they needed to have a number one receiver. They wanted to have an offense where they spread the ball around to everybody, and the offense was so bad that they were forced to give up a number one for Amari.
But they also didn't have CeeDee Lamb then.
No, they didn't. But
And
I mean,
and Michael Gallup wasn't Michael Gallup,
right?
And Dalton
but the
Schultz
offensive
wasn't
line
Dalton
was
Schultz.
The offensive line and run game were much, much better.
Absolutely. I mean, again, and they also didn't have a lot of cap problems at that point, or at least not like that. Because I mean, they just signed the Zeke deal at that point, right? If I'm not mistaken. And so
before they traded for Amari,
yeah,
it was after they signed Zeke in 2019. So
okay, so
Amari was there half the year.
So the point is that it's still different math. I mean, the players that are surrounded by Dak are different. And again, like I also want to point out that like any plan that involves getting rid of Amari Cooper involves also replacing somebody with Amari, or attempting to replace Amari Cooper, right? Like involves maybe a high draft pick or a free agent signing. So it's not like I'm not suggesting that any free agent can replace Cooper. That's not what we're saying. But what I'm saying is that it's not like, hey, we're just getting rid of Cooper and we're rolling with everybody else that we got here. Like Cooper's money is such that you hopefully could get Gallup, you could get Schultz, and then maybe even a third player with some of that money. So I don't want to be the guy. I don't want to be the guy advocating for this because I don't love this plan. But I see at least what the other side is and why they're convincing themselves that this is a good plan.
I agree. So I think that's pretty clearly the plan. And Michael Gallup laid it out last night when I was watching the Combine. I read that on Dallas Morning News. John Mosher talked about that as well. If they do release Amari, they'll save $16 million. The plan would be to franchise Dalton Schultz, if not sign him to a long-term deal, and then bring back Michael Gallup. And hopefully the numbers would be close, right? Let's say they do that. Let's say that's ultimately what the Cowboys do. They bring back Schultz and Gallup and they let go of Amari. Is that even a good plan?
No, it's not.
That's my problem, right?
But bringing Cooper back is not a good plan either, in my opinion. Like that's my point, is that none of this is a good plan. The Cowboys are in a crappy situation, and they're trying to eat the less disgusting sandwich, the least disgusting sandwich.
All right, let me ask you this: would you rather keep Amari on his deal or have Schultz and Gallup?
I think it's hard.
I wonder if the news of yesterday about Blake Jarwin, which we'll get to in a second, impacted that at all.
It very well could be. I mean, that certainly gives a way, and we need to talk about that, obviously.
Yeah,
but that certainly gives away kind of a lot of your solutions if you decide to go away from Schultz and Gallup. If you decide to keep Cooper and just roll with what you have, and then kind of draft a tight end out behind Jarwin, that kind of got blown out of the water by the fact that, I mean, that news about Jarwin doesn't necessarily. It not only doesn't sound good for this year, it doesn't sound good moving beyond this year.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and talk about that, and we'll kind of tie it back into everything. But before we do that, I want to tell you guys about Bet Online. Football might be over this season, and thank goodness, because that season was something else. But basketball is in full steam with both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the #1 spot for all of your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts.
So real quick, you said that thank goodness football season is over. I'm assuming that means that your LA Lakers are doing great in basketball this year, right?
I hate sports so much.
Sorry.
All right. So Blake Jarwin, Michael Gallup of Dallas Morning News had a report yesterday that Jarwin underwent hip surgery in February, and that is scheduled to keep him out most of the 2020 season, if not all of the 2020 season. It's important to remember that the Cowboys gave Blake Jarwin a contract extension after the 2019 season. Since then, he's played in 9 games, and he has a total of 12 catches for 108 yards. So it's pretty fair to think that Jarwin, going into his age 28 season, will not be available at all. And you have to wonder, will he ever play football again? If it's a serious, rare hip injury that it's been described as, it's got to be concerning, right?
I keep thinking about Bo Jackson,
Yeah.
right? Like that's, and I hate that. I hope it's nothing as serious as that, right? But
I mean, if you had the surgery in February and they're already basically ruling you out for the 2022 season,
that's not great.
it's pretty bad.
It's pretty bad, and it certainly isn't something we like to talk about because it's ugly. And Jarwin is seemingly a good guy, and we've kind of constantly been waiting for Jarwin to get his opportunity to break out, and it seems like as soon as he got that chance, things kind of went badly for him. He got an ACL injury, and clearly this hip has been going on. So. I mean, and honestly, I think a lot of people are missing too. And I'm glad that we're talking about this in conjunction with the Cooper situation, because I think they're tied together. You can't, the idea of keeping those high end players is that you still have starters on cheapish contracts that can, perform at a high level. And without that Jarwin piece, which was your hope of, okay, well, at the very least, maybe we can get some decent backup tight ends in here. Jarwin can be a receiving threat. Then you can keep a guy like Cooper because you can afford to have starter level talent there while having Cooper. That goes out the window, because now Jarwin's not an option there. You have to find a solution at tight end, because ultimately now you're talking about a situation where, and just to kind of loop back, this answers our question, doesn't it? Why were they looking so hard at tight ends? The answer is, even if Schultz comes back, they still need another tight end.
At least,
So I think ultimately Jarwin's injury may have had a heavy hand in this, because, you don't get that option of, okay, we'll keep Cooper. We'll let Schultz and Gallup walk. We still have Jarwin. We'll try to cobble together a tight end situation. That's gone now. So now you either need to re-sign Schultz, sign somebody serious and free agent, or spend a high draft pick on it. I don't think a high draft pick is an option.
No.
As far as for a starter. I don't know how many other tight ends that they're gonna get that are starter level that aren't gonna be as expensive as what you're probably gonna have to pay Schultz anyways. So it kind of made a stronger influence on this situation than I think a lot of people are talking about. Right?
Yeah, and I think the appeal for the Cowboys with Schultz is they could franchise tag him now, and it would give them some time to work on a long-term deal, right? Which they could potentially lower the cap hit this year, freeing up some space to go out and try to sign, maybe Michael Gallup and Randy Gregory or somebody like that, right? Yeah. It's really tough. They're in a tough spot. I would rather keep the guy that I think, when he's playing his best, can be a real difference maker. I mean, you saw it in the playoff game. He was the only guy to score a touchdown for the Cowboys, right? And he ran a beautiful route with Amari Cooper. I think I don't want to say it's necessarily easier to replace Schultz, because tight ends are hard to find, but I think I can live with average production at tight end, or, a journeyman tight end, rather than I can a journeyman receiver, right? Like if you go out and get, I don't know, name a name, Hayden Hurst or OJ Howard, and you have that guy playing tight end next year and Amari Cooper on the outside, I think your offense is better than doing the reverse of that.
Yeah, I just think I think it's hard to know at this point, because I think that we felt that was the case last year, and that we were going to get big numbers out of Amari Cooper, and that just never happened. I mean, even at the end of the year, we were talking about where's the consistency? Where's the consistency? Where's the consistency in this offense? Not just in Cooper, in this offense. And I think that kind of running it all back necessarily is not like a guarantee that situation is going to get better. I mean, not that changing it up is necessarily going to make it better, but I think that there's, again, I'd like to just kind of dissuade the idea that, you bring Cooper back and you're automatically going to get 2020 Cooper, like, or 2020 Cooper. Like I think there's been issues with Cooper. Like I'm not trying to like be the guy that wants to get rid of him, but like, let's not pretend like there hasn't been issues with consistency with Cooper. There hasn't been issues with him, kind of having that track athlete sort of mentality, right? Where if he's not 100%, he's not 100%, and he struggles to play through injury at times. So I think that's added and caused some of his injury stuff. When he's healthy and he's on, he's
one of the
top 5 wide receiver. There's a reason that you paid him $20 million. But I think the problem that the Cowboys are having is that they can't afford the kind of up and down nature of what they've gotten from him. And honestly, Marcus, it doesn't matter whether it's Cooper that's not playing well or the Cowboys offense not feeding him enough targets to get the production out of what they need out of him. If the offense doesn't, provide for that, then they shouldn't be paying a wide receiver $20 million a year. Like, I think that's the thing I keep coming back to is that if your offense isn't going to provide number one targets for your number one wide receiver, then you should either change your offense or change the payment of your wide receivers. So they've decided to change the payment of their wide receivers, not their offense. So.
Correct. And I think that's
maybe
that's what they're going to do. Is that going to make their offense better? Like, is Kellen Moore and the offense going to be able to adjust to, okay, hey, now we don't have a receiver that's automatically going to dictate coverage and get to number one corner and be able to win on the outside. We're going to have to do a lot of things to scheme guys open. Is that where Kellen Moore is going to thrive? I don't know.
At the same time, he's also not going to need to like funnel a bunch of catches to the wide receiver that they have to get involved early, or he won't be part of the game plan later. Like it's not an easy game. It's not an easy fit. It's not as one, like I said, it's not cut and dry, and they don't have any good decisions here. The problem is that they needed Cooper to have a more consistent year last year. They needed him to be a larger part of this offense, and he wasn't. Whether that's the offensive game calling, whether that's the scheme, whether that's Cooper himself not playing up to the level that we expect, ultimately at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter to them. It's just not, the juice is not worth the squeeze, so they're trying to figure out other alternatives to it, and some of them are, most of them are not good alternatives, to be honest.
Right. All right. I want to talk about Michael Gallup because he factors in this a lot, right?
Yeah.
Because if they do cut Amari, they probably plan on bringing Michael Gallup back. My problem with this is, should they bring Michael Gallup back? Let's talk about where his value is, depending on where you look, right? I believe Over the Cap has him at like $13 million a year. Pro Football Focus, their cap experts project him to get like $12.5 million a year. I think the Cowboys believe he's going to get $4 or $5 million a year. And I'm worried that the plan is going to be like, if Gallup gets to the open market, all of a sudden he's going to get an offer from the Browns at 3 years, $35 million. And the Cowboys are going to have no choice but to either match that deal or let him walk. And I just don't know. Can you go into the draft with your receivers being CeeDee Lamb, Simi Fehoko, and ex-veteran that you signed for $2 million? I don't know.
That's a very good question. I think the thing is that you look at the wide receiver market this year, and it's insane. I mean, I think that's part of the reason that you're seeing the teams are not wanting to trade for Amari Cooper right now, is that if given the option of signing a free agent off the street or trading for a $20 million a year plus Amari Cooper, teams are opting for the option of a free agency.
Well, let's be clear. If Amari gets on the open market, he's still going to make a ton. I just don't think.
Oh, absolutely, but I think the point is the market is robust, and so I don't know if it'll be interesting to see if Gallup gets that kind of money in this kind of market. I mean, I think his market seems to be all over the place. Is I guess what I'm getting at. He's a guy who didn't have a great season last year that you think has big upside, but he's coming off an ACL injury, so there's lots of kind of conflicting things on his stock. It'll be interesting to see exactly what he gets.
All right, let me ask you this: what if Michael Gallup says, "Hey, Cowboys, this is the deal I want, or I'm walking"? It's a 3-year deal worth $9 million a season. Are you even interested in giving him that?
At $9 million a year?
At $9 million a year. Because my issue is, even when he was the number 2 receiver, the outside receiver, he wasn't super efficient. He's never had a year where he's caught more than 58% of his passes. The yards per attempt have dropped now in 3 straight years. And he's now coming off a torn ACL, and he missed time last year with an injury, with the calf injury. Like, you're investing in somebody who is kind of damaged goods and hasn't always been the most consistent player anyways.
I mean, 9 million seems a little bit high. My number's like, I think 6 to 8 is what I keep thinking. That 9 million is really, really you read my brain and you're trying to trick me.
No, I mean, I think I would not be surprised at all if a team offers him more money than that. Because I saw Tim Patrick get $11 million per year from the Broncos this year. Michael Gallup has better career numbers and he's younger. That's the starting point of Gallup's agent.
Yeah. I mean, again, I also think the individual seasons markets are different. You can dictate that a little bit too. But yeah, I mean, wide receiver we talked about it a few weeks ago. The market is absolutely bizarre.
It is
not just because of who's in it this year, but the last few years, like some of the contracts that have come out haven't made any sense. And I mean that in both ways. Some of them are way too big, and some of them you scratch your head like, why did that person accept that little money? But I have to think that with all these wide receivers coming out and all these wide receivers in the free agent market, it's like the league is full of wide receivers. Maybe not the top end guys, but there's tons of very productive wide receivers available. So I wonder how that affects the market.
I'll be honest. If the Cowboys cut Amari Cooper, I'd rather them just not spend any more money on receivers in free agency. Like, if you're going to rebuild your wide receiver room, rebuild it. Don't just bring back everybody minus Amari Cooper, because you're going to be worse, right? I'd rather have something different than something lesser from what I saw last year, right? I'd rather use that money to keep some offensive linemen, or go out inside an offensive lineman, or build up my defense. And hey, if I got to spend the 24th pick on a receiver this year and get somebody younger with maybe a little bit more speed that's healthy, I'd rather do that than bring back Gallup at $9-10 million a year.
But okay, but like, let's say you sign him for like 7 or 8 million, right? And then you go and draft a guy at 24. Do you feel like that's on the road to potentially getting back to where you wanted to if things kind of develop the way you want?
Maybe, but that seems like a lot of resources to hopefully be as good as you were last year at that same spot, right?
Well, I mean, you have to go into all of this with the idea that you're hoping that your talent, especially your young talent, is improving you. Because honestly, like, it's I mean, again, we've had these conversations before. Rolling this whole team back with the same group, that's not inspiring either.
Right. Well, that's why I'm thinking I'd rather not do that. Like, I'd rather just sign a veteran, like, for $2 or $3 million a year, and draft somebody and say, hey, we're in stage 1 of our rebuild at receiver. Like, I'd rather do that than say, hey, it's going to be CeeDee Lamb, a first-round pick, and Michael Gallup. That feels like a lot of assets to hopefully maybe be as good as you were in 2020 or 2021. Does that make sense, though? I'd almost rather hit the reset button there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think in this scenario, the difference between not resetting and resetting is just signing Michael Gallup at that point, right? Like, yeah, I mean, either scenario, we're talking about getting rid of Cooper. So it's like,
I'll be honest. Partly, I think I'm not sure Gallup and CeeDee work well together. Because I think you're getting two guys that are non-4.4 speed guys, and I mean, CeeDee is really good after the catch. Gallup is more of a catch and traffic guy. I'd rather add some more speed elements to this offense, right?
Well, and see, that's why my interest would be like to sign Gallup and then to go get a speed guy, whether that's like someone in the draft or someone in free agency, maybe, like Christian Kirk or someone like that in the free agency. Or
see, I'd rather do that than sign Gallup. I would. And it's not that I don't love Gallup. I do. I like you, I don't want to see them run it back necessarily.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm on board with that too. If you wanted to, instead of you wanted to pay Gallup $9 million, you want to go give that to Christian Kirk, who, if I'm not mistaken, Well, I could be wrong. He may be younger, right? Even though I think they
Same
came out
class,
in
he
the
is
same
a little bit
class.
younger. I think
Same
he's a
class,
year
but he's
younger.
younger. Yeah.
Yep.
So I think I think that the skill set kind of more matches what you're
Sure.
missing, right? Like, and so it's a little bit more kind of diverse skill set there. I'm okay with that too. I just think that my thought is that if you can get Gallup for under $7 million, you should do it, because I think that that's a
I'm not
safe
opposed to
gamble.
that.
It's a safe gamble. That's a guy that, you could come off the ACL. He has a repertoire with Dak. And despite not being a 4-4 guy, he is one of the best deep receivers in the league. That's the part, when you were pointing out the problems with Gallups that he's had last year, the efficiency, that doesn't really matter to me as much with him. But the thing that does bother me is that he needs to get that yards per catch back up where it was the previous years, because that's where he has value.
And now I'm worried about if he can do that coming off 2 pretty big lower body injuries, right? A knee and a fairly significant calf injury. So we'll see. Let's take a quick break so we can tell you guys about Built Bar. This time of year, almost everybody has given up on their New Year's resolutions, but not us. We are sticking to ours thanks to Built Bar. Built Bars are the absolute best protein bar on the market right now. They only contain 130 calories with 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar that usually has 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. They've got so many great flavors, including mint brownie, coconut almond, and the new flavor this month is white chocolate cookies and cream. They are all delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. Go to built.com and use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, I know the combine's going on. We can talk about that in a second. But any final thoughts on the Amari Cooper thing before we kind of wrap this up? I know we've been talking about this for seems like forever now, but it seems it's becoming pretty close to becoming official now.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I would add is that it's just not as straightforward as we're all making it out to be, and there really isn't any new information that we've gotten since 3 or 4 weeks ago when this story first came out. It's just that Schefter tweeted it out again, and everybody got newly angry about it. But I think the Cowboys are in a bad spot here, and they don't have good options, and I think that no matter what, I don't think anyone's going to be fully satisfied immediately after either keeping or releasing Cooper. So,
yeah, I don't disagree. I saw the report from Ian Rappaport that they're going to try to trade him. Do you think they will?
No, I think the reason that they can't trade him is the reason that he's going to be cut, right? Is because he doesn't have a ton of guaranteed money. And he has a very high base salary. So unless the Cowboys are willing to take on some of that base salary in order to trade him, then I don't think he becomes a very tradable piece. And I don't know why the Cowboys would be wanting to take on the money in order to trade, because if they're willing to take on the money, they just take the player and have him play for you. So I think that for them, they view it as resources that they need to sign other players that they want to keep.
So it's the base salary is $20 million per year for the next 3 years.
That's not very tradable.
No, but I could see a team that, like, if he knows he's going to get cut, just being like, you know what, we wouldn't have a chance to sign him anyways.
Yeah,
let's just go ahead and do it now. For example, Jacksonville isn't going to be able to sign Amari Cooper in free agency, right? No. They're just not. Like, they could offer him a similar deal, but there's going to be teams with more established quarterbacks that probably play in domes that are going to be more appealing to Amari. But if I only have to give up a 5th or 6th round pick to get Amari Cooper on my team, and I already have endless amounts of cap space, and it helps my team, I could see it. Yeah. Will the Cowboys try to do right by Amari? Maybe Amari wants to hit free agency. I mean, that could be part of it as well. We'll see. I expect him to get a lot of money still in free agency. And I expect him to sign probably within the division. Probably.
I mean, that would make sense. Washington tried to sign him when we tried to sign him, so I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to. Philly probably would look at him, I imagine.
Oh yeah, I think Philly would love him, right? Another Alabama guy, pair him with Hurts and Devontae Smith, and boom, we've figured out our wide receiver need, and we didn't have to spend one of our 3 draft picks, our 3 first-round picks.
All they got to do is get a quarterback, and they're in it, man.
And that's what's terrifying, right? If they go get Amari and they trade those picks for, say, Russell Wilson, it's pretty scary. We're going to talk about the combine a lot next week. The only thing I really wanted to mention, yes, the times were juiced and all that kind of stuff for primetime audience.
Geez,
I don't think that was a coincidence, by the way.
Can we talk
right?
about how ridiculously obvious that was? Like,
Sure.
I don't know. Like, I didn't watch any of it yesterday, but I started seeing the times come in and I was like, oh, so now that they're putting it on primetime, suddenly Chris Olave runs a 4.26. Oh, that makes sense. Sure. Yeah. It's just ridiculous, man. Like,
And then
just give us the times.
12:30 Eastern time. That's when they released the official times. And Olave went from 4.26 to 4.39.
You think that's a big jump? You know, I mean,
so
as far as
cool.
percentiles in wide receivers, it's really not because almost no one runs a 4.26. But I mean, it's just kind of the quiet. They say the quiet part quietly later.
Yeah.
Right? You ran a 4.26. It was actually a 4.39.
The only thing that I wanted to ask you about was Tyler Linderbaum. I don't know if you saw his measurements from today.
22-inch arms, right? Wasn't it?
Not far off. So
I'm just gonna keep going lower and lower until the Cowboys get an opportunity to draft him at 24.
Yeah, I mean, the only all right. So I'll read the stuff. Actually, the weight doesn't bother me. 6'2", 296. So there you go.
That's
He's
great.
over the
that was good. Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah.
31 and an 1/8 inch arms, 75-inch wingspan.
That's not great, Bob, but you know, I mean, we knew that this guy was a smaller sized guy. He's not a tackle. You know, he's a center, so arm length is not quite the same level of his importance.
Correct.
You know, what I worry about him is not, you know, having to slide out and stop a pass rusher screaming around the edge. That's not what a center does. What I worry about is him having to deal with big hog molly nose tackles one-on-one in pass blocking. And whether he has 31-inch arms or 33-inch arms, I don't know how much that's going to help him there. So I think the other parts of his game are what are likely to really help him there. The being able to kind of sit and play with leverage and be strong. You know, so that it's very low and it's historically low. But I would still take him at 24. And I would encourage all 23 teams above the Cowboys to really, really look hard into the fact that 31-inch arms is not long enough.
So since 2000 at the combine, 27 offensive linemen have measured in with sub 32-inch arms. Okay. The player that has played the most snaps has 800 career snaps in the NFL of that list.
Wow. 800 career snaps?
Yes.
And how many players? I'm sorry, say again?
27 players. The one that has the most snaps has 800 career snaps.
Who is it?
Ben Bredesen.
Oh. Well, what do you think? I mean, I feel like that was a very loaded quotation of statistics.
I still like him, and I think I would still draft him for the Cowboys. But I'd be lying if it didn't make me at least a little bit nervous, right? Like you're certainly taking an outlier. Again, the weight is fine. I'm okay drafting a small center. Am I okay drafting a small and short arm center? That's the conversation that I have to have with myself. I'm assuming the answer is yes. But if that's the case, we better be zone blocking on every single play, right? We better be having him move on every single play. It's a little concerning. That's all. Just a little bit.
I think it's really going to matter what kind of guards you have around him, you know? And I think as long as you got some strong, solid guards around him.
But you do it to the right. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. And I think, getting a big guy as a left guard shouldn't be too difficult. And we can go back to Norvell and like we talked the kind of scenarios we talked about if you wanted to go that route of signing a free agent left guard or something. Those are all possibilities. So I just think that, he's just too talented of a player, I feel like, to kind of just completely wipe off your board because he came in like half inch shorter on the arms than you thought.
But I do think like taking him at like 13 or 14, if you're one of those other teams, that's where it gets a little risky. Like 24, 25, and I know the Cowboys drafted 24, right? But like bottom end of the first round, it becomes a lot more palatable to draft that guy rather than taking him inside of the top 12, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that this would be a different conversation at that point because you need to take an elite player with.
Yeah, if we were drafting at 10 like the Cowboys were last year, right? That's where it becomes really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I agree.
All right. Well, we'll get some more measurements and stuff and testing drills all over the weekend. We'll be back on Monday to talk about all the drills. Offensive linemen on Friday, I believe defensive linemen and linebackers on Saturday, corners on Sunday. It's going to be a busy next couple of days. We'll recap it all for you on Monday's episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Follow the show wherever you get your podcast. You can follow Landon at McCool BCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosher. We'll see you guys next time.